The result of the U.S. presidential race will have tremendous implications for global trade, as both nominees touch upon the need for tariffs, with one speaking of carefully tailored tariffs and the other vowing substantial tariffs on all imports. We have details on Press Perspective today. Hello and welcome to Thursday's edition of Press Perspective for October 31st here in South Korea. I'm Min Sunhee. Today we touch upon the global trade implications of the U.S. presidential race and its result. For more on this, I have Celio Fioretti, a correspondent for French daily La Croix. Celio, welcome back.
Glad to be here.
I also have Professor Oh Joon-seok at Sookmyung Women's University live on the line. Professor Oh, it's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
Right, Celio, we'll start here in the studio. Let's begin with what little has been shared about the trade policies of the two presidential nominees, who both appear to embrace tariffs, though. So how are they similar? How do they differ? And what are the implications of these tariffs for U.S. trade partners, including South Korea and, of course, Europe?
Yes, tariffs seems to be back in popularity in the U.S. It's true that the time of the global peace trade of the early 2000s are over, and now it's time for trade wars, and especially between the U.S. and China. And as in every war, you need weapons, and tariffs are one of them. While before Democrats and Republicans both oppose this kind of policy, now they both embrace it, but of course their view differs a little bit on how they will enforce it. Let's start with Kamala Harris for the Democrats. Harris has not said much on the matter for now, but she didn't even imply if she would impose new levies against China. But Charles Ludwak, a spokesperson for her campaign, said in a brief statement that Harris will employ targeted tariffs for specific sectors to support the American workers. That means enforce tariff on sectors that would be competitive against the U.S. To make an incentive to buy U.S. cheaper products. The Biden administration already had tariffs before against China and proposed to add more at the end of the term, including a 100% tax on Chinese EV vehicles. We don't know if it will continue, but probably the one that are already in will probably stays. Especially, maybe there was a proposition to have more tariffs on semiconductors or steels, which would impact Korean business in the U.S. because these two are major imports of Korea in the U.S. So I guess Korea will have to negotiate maybe a way out, a way around these tariffs, like Korea did with the EU and its tax on carbon and on EV vehicles too. Now for Trump, of course, it's more radical. Trump has said he wants to slap 10 to 20% tariff on all goods, no matter the country of origin, and even more on Chinese, we could reach 60%. Right now, the tariff in the US are around 2% for most of the goods, so it's a sharp increase. So we'll see exactly how it will apply.
Right. Celio, meanwhile, according to economists interviewed by CNN, a second Trump administration, they claim, will, and I quote, is likely to make the world poorer. Could you tell us a bit more about the coverage by CNN with regard to the interviews conducted on these economists, and do you share these concerns as well?
So the tariff, to be briefly summarized, is a tax on imports, basically, making consumers in the country that impose them pay a bit more, also not only the consumer, but also the companies that need to import raw materials to product. So going ahead with this higher tariff would antagonize U.S. partners, both in Europe but Asia, and also provoke maybe some kind of a trade wars, damaging the whole global economic welfare. In a world of intertwined societies and economies, a unilateral decision like this, even as much as 10%, the minimum that Trump is proposing, could significantly impact European economies and Asian economies too. For example, in the article by CNN, analysts at UBS estimated a 60% tariff on Chinese on all import from China, and a 10% tariff on goods from the rest of the world would lower global economic growth by 1 percentage point by 2026. So it's very soon. Company profit would on average fall by 6%, and global stock indexes will also drop. Now, of course, there would be retaliation from the other countries, China, both Europe and the rest of Asia. And according to the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, a severe scenario of widespread increase of trade and tariffs in the whole world could put the global output plunge by 7% in the longer run. Now, in my opinion, it doesn't mean the end of the world. It's more of a change of paradigm, a change of how the world works right now. We have been used to more than 50 years of free trade everywhere in the world, and a rise in protectionism like this doesn't mean the end of trade. It would certainly slower it down, but there will still be trade, and Trump's approach on that matter is more about changing the global trading system to a more a patchwork of bilateral deals, one by one, on a specific resource, on a specific product, which would put us back to a pre-World War II scenario before all the Free Trade Agency and the World Trade Organization.
Right. Professor Oh, this CNN article cites economists warning that Mr. Trump's proposed tariffs will, and I quote, hurt global economic growth. That being said, Professor Oh, what looks to be the impact on the South Korean economy?
Absolutely. It will hurt global economy and economic growth of Korea eventually. I fully agree with Mr. Trump's approach is like a perfect storm. When it comes to international trade, I could remember a historic momentum. The U.S. has already got a lesson from Smooth-Hawley Tariff Act, igniting tariff war of the U.S. against the rest of the world, while the legislation sat on the President's desk 1,028 American economists called for a veto at that time. The measure provoked angry retaliation by 25 trading partners, and U.S. exports fell by nearly 2/3 in just 2 years. Mr. Trump's proposed ramping up of tariff have the potential to significantly reshape the trade relations and supply chains with notable sequence of its trade priorities and the cycle of retaliation. The largest adverse effect would be to China's economy. There would be limited impact across the European Union, but potentially substantial challenges. According to Kiev, one of the economic think tanks in Korea, they estimate that 10% of universal tariff would knock the country's shipment to the U.S. down by $15.2 billion per year, and those two other countries by $9 billion. I doubt rationality prevails in Washington, and I really wonder if the pro-tariff mania during the Great Depression remains a danger still now.
Right. And Celio, in very sharp contrast, Vice President Kamala Harris's economic policies have secured the support of 23 Nobel economists. Do tell us a bit about their thoughts, first regarding her policies, and then, of course, on the policies of Mr. Trump's as well.
Yes, nearly 24 of Nobel Prize winning economists have come in support to Vice President and Democrat candidate Kamala Harris' economic agenda, saying it's vastly superior to Donald Trump's plan. While the details of the presidential candidate's economic program still is a bit unclear, it's not fully laid out yet. What they said, the economists said, combined with what they've done in the past, what they see in the previous administration, especially for Trump, give them a clear picture of the policies and practices that will be put in place for the future presidential term. Now, of course, each economist have different point of view on the specific measure, but they believe that overall, Harris' economic agenda will improve United States health, investments, sustainability, employment, and fairness, and is overall vastly superior to Donald Trump's, which is considered counterproductive to the current situation of the U.S. They believe that Kamala Harris would be a far better steward of the economy than Donald Trump. They explain that Harris' policies emphasize policies and strengthen the middle class, enhance competition between companies, and promote the rise of entrepreneurship to create new startups, new businesses, which will increase the strength of the US economy in the long run, as well as the global economy, which is very important in today's matter. They heavily criticized Trump's policies, including the high tariff, as we just mentioned, and the regressive tax cuts on the corporation and individuals, saying that they will lead to higher prices, larger deficits, and greater inequality. They add that Trump threatened the global economic order as it is now.
Right. And Professor Oh, speaking as a scholar yourself, I should have asked you this earlier, but what are your general thoughts on the idea of tariffs in global trade?
Tariffs gain its emotional power of protectionism at the sacrifice of a consumer's satisfaction. That is why bilateral and multilateral FTAs and comprehensive economic partnership agreements are so popular nowadays and prevalent to keep the consumer's satisfaction. In addition, nowadays, it has been a recent trend to standardize customs clearing processes and inspection procedures, and then simplification of the security protectionism in the name of trade and investment facilitation to advance the trade efficiency. This is the current trend. Tariff comes from Tarifa. It's a name of a region south of Spain. As Tarifa is so famous for a windy area, preferred to take that waterway by the crew of trade vessels, they were willing to pay entrance fee to pass through the Tarifa for the sake of saving time and gaining speed. It is true, and it might be considered inevitable, in a sense, to control the market access of import and to fill up the tax revenues. It is, however, also true and might be unwise. No one could afford to take that waterway due to heavy burden of tariff. What could he step for? In this sense, Mr. Trump is going against the trend, and he tried to go overboard.
Right. And back to bilateral economic interactions between South Korea and the US. Professor Oh, according to an analysis by British daily Financial Times, South Korean businesses made the biggest project commitments in the US last year at, and I quote, $21.5 billion under the Biden and Harris administration. Could you tell us a bit about the capital invested by Korean companies in the US last year?
Thank you for asking, Sunny. No doubt, the U.S. is the destination of foreign direct investment of Korean companies in the process of reforming global supply chain and in the process of building market base in the U.S. The percentage of Korean outbound FDI in the United States reaches a 35-year high last year, driven by Washington's incentives such as CHIPS Act and Inflation Reduction Act. In response to those kind of incentives, Korean companies have set a new record by committing to 90 U.S. projects last year, making a 50% increase from the previous year, positions Korea as the largest investor in the United States, surpassing Taiwan. This investment strategy is largely driven by substantial subsidies aimed at curbing China's access to advanced technologies. Major players like Samsung Electronics and LG Energy Solution have announced a plan to build facilities in Texas and Arizona. Korea's share of cumulative FDI in the U.S. rose to around 2.3% between 2020 and 2022. Korean companies have operated a total of 2,432 businesses in the United States, with 26% in manufacturing and 21.6% in wholesale. By state, 24% of companies are located in California, 11.1% in Texas, and 7.9% in New York. This trend would be continued in forming strategic supply chain in the market base of great importance and for creating shared prosperity between two countries.
Right, and speaking about Samsung Electronics, Celio, you recently wrote an article about the advances sought by Korea in the chip industry. Do tell us a bit about your coverage and how do you see this particular ambition of advancing in the chip industry being affected by the result of the U.S. presidential race?
Indeed, last week I went to Daejeon and to visit the KAIST, the Korea Advanced Institute of Science and Technology. And in that institute, they have a small laboratory where they innovate and create the future of the chip industry. I met with the director of the lab, Mr. Yoo Hae-jeon, which is trying to basically recreate a brain into a computer, into a microchip. Right now, the trend in the chip industry these days is the AI chip, a chip that is more powerful, that can help the AI development, that will be now used in almost everything, from the phone to the car, and even maybe your laundry machine one day. So they are creating the future of the chip, and the 2024 US presidential election will certainly have a significant impact on the chip market. Both candidates have recognized the chip as a role that is critical for the US economy, but also US strategic interest. What's already clear is that the US will continue to boost its domestic production, its domestic chip manufacturing industry. Trump accused Taiwan of stealing America's chip industry recently, and also criticized the US CHIPS Act that was enforced by Joe Biden before, suggesting that he would impose tariff on Taiwanese chips if he is elected again. Trump also qualified Korea as now an economic enemy of the US. So we could imagine maybe a similar decision concerning South Korean chip exports. Despite this, the US semiconductor industry still relies heavily on manufacturing capabilities outside of its territory, in South Korea, in Taiwan. Democratic presidential candidate Kamala Harris, on the other hand, is expected to maintain maybe the Biden's strategy on the chips to make allies in the region against the competition with China. So as the AI technology and the AI chip booms surge in the US, markets gets bigger and bigger with higher demand for it. The big question is, can US really supply itself without the need to import South Korean or Taiwanese chips? That's really not sure. And also, if they want to do it, they will need a technological edge, which for now is shared between Korea and Taiwan.
Right, and against this cloud of uncertainty, if I may, Professor, regardless of who wins the US election, the government here in South Korea has vowed to continue to invest in the US. What are your proposals, Professor, for Korea's economic policies moving forward?
It will stay solid, then there will be a continuity. But from the perspectives of practice side, I might be one of players of the past. But just shipping goods for the foreign market is not enough. In line with localization strategies, investment in the United States for manufacturing base in particular might be helping American consumers feel even better about Korean product, as they know that Korean brands are actually manufactured in the United States. In this way, unilateral trade-driven economic policy of Korea of the past should be modified and then advanced further into collaborative partnership-driven economic policies in parallel with the trade and investment partners of the United States. In this regard, Korea and the United States are expect to maintain strong bilateral economic relations regardless of the outcome of the upcoming U.S. presidential election. Whoever wins the election, Korea and the United States are ultimate economic and security partners. So we will continue to invest and cooperate with each other, which is a win-win for both countries. The importance of Korea, Japan, and the United States all working together has been a huge step forward for the alliance for the future.
Right. And Celio, speaking as a journalist from Europe, what do you believe are the concerns within governments there with regard to trade policies of the US under a potential new leadership?
Yeah, a potential 10% tariff rise on all European goods, as is proposed by Republican candidate Donald Trump, as we mentioned before, could have also significant repercussion on the Europe export-driven industries, disrupting its largest partners overseas. EU exporters like Germany and Italy, for prepare for potential challenges. Although China surpassed the US as the European top partner in 2020, the US remains Europe's largest trading partner with services and investment too. Moreover, the EU, the European Union, is the next exporter of goods to the US with positive good balance of about 158 billion euros in 2023. European exports to the US are led by machinery and chemistry. Germany and Italy are Europe's leading countries in the matter. And for example, if we take like just the vehicle industry, it's a critical segment for Germany. And so the German economy could experience a severe backdrop if higher tariffs are imposed by the US. It will also further weaken the whole economy of Germany with maybe less employment. If Trump proceeds with the proposed tariff, as he said, even just 10%, the lower he proposed, of course the EU Commission will probably impose some retaliation on the US with countermeasures to protect the European industry. Possible responses could include other tariffs also on US imports, or maybe diversifying trade partners, maybe going more to Asia and China. So that poses a risk both for the economy, but also maybe for the global world order. Retaliation and intensified tariff could also lead to some production slowdown in key exports, but also could lead the EU to create to reindustrialize faster than it was expected.
Right. Well, the future course of global trade will become more clearer after the presidential election on November 5th over in the US. Celio, thank you so much for your time and your thoughts. And Professor, thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you.
Right. Well, that ends this edition of Press Perspective. See you same time tomorrow.